Okay, so now that we've covered some of the basics of the rules of lettering as well as some basic styles, I'm going to go into how to compose your piece by breaking down how I did it with my GeoFilter with lettering, and that's with this design that says Sextate. So to start off, we will take the thumbnail sketch that we came up with earlier in the brainstorming stage, and this is simply the same idea, but it's just not refined yet. So what we want to do is we could stick this to the side, and then from there we could just sketch out our idea and then refine it as we go. Now, as you can see, my lettering concept already has some letter interactions, and this is because I already knew what my GeoFilter ended up being, but to be honest, when I first started sketching it, I didn't know of those letter interactions right away. So let's just pretend that we don't know these letter interactions exist yet. So it's just going to be Sextate. And we could use a brush pen. So your concept likely won't have any letter interactions right away because you're going to figure that out as you sketch it out. So if you're starting out like that, a good way is just to identify the letters that we pointed out in the letter interactions lesson and see what letters your word or phrase or name has. So with this one, I can see that my T and so in this one I can see that both the letter T and the other letter T are good interactions with the crossbar. And I can see with my word that I have the letter T and T in my, and I can see that letter T is one of the and by looking at my word, I can tell that the letter T is one of the letters that have a letter interaction through the crossbar of the T. So then to start off, I'm going to sketch out the GeoFilter in the lettering style that I chose, which is a script style, and then add that letter interaction as I go. Alright, so now that I have a rough sketch of the lettering, I'm going to go ahead and create that letter interaction between the two T's. So now it's looking a little bit better with the letter interaction. It looks a little bit more playful. And now we're just wondering how to incorporate some more interactivity and make it a little bit more fun to look at. Another thing I like to do is do a baseline shift, and what that means is this is the baseline, but maybe some letters can go below it and others can go above it. And what this does, it kind of creates a little bit of a better rhythm to it, because you see that this beginning letter would be a little bit bigger than these letters a little bit smaller. And what I mean by that is we can then bring this down lower. Imagine that this is getting crossed off or erased. We can take this white pencil to kind of blur it out a little bit. And then just imagine that this is going a little bit below that baseline. So it has a little bit more visual interest. And I'm not stretching this. If it was, you don't want to stretch it. You want to make it proportional and just make it a little bit bigger of an S, possibly. It just looks a little bit stretched just because it's in pen, just so you can see a little bit better. But basically bringing that S a little bit bigger and making it a little bit drop below that baseline. And then you could also come back and erase and make these letters a little bit smaller. So this is already starting to look a little bit better, and these bigger S's and this baseline shift is making it a little bit more interesting, because it's creating more of a rhythm of a big and a small, small, big, small, small, small. And this is something that makes it a little bit more interesting rather than it just being the same, same, same. And what we can also do to increase this balance of the lettering piece is to create a letter interaction on this first word. Now we have one here with the word state, but we can also try to find one here, even though there's not a set letter that's really good for letter interactions, as we mentioned before. So what I've noticed is when I was sketching this piece is that this S can be curved around and then connected with this A as a letter interaction. The only issue is just to make sure that when you're creating your own letter interactions is that you maintain the legibility of the letters. So what I did initially was connect it all the way through, and I realized that that wasn't going to make it very legible. So what I did was do this underlap. And what an underlap is you just have a break, so it's not connecting or intersecting other letters, and you could kind of tell that there's some level of depth, like this is going around and it's going under this letter, and that's what you can do. And now this part is overlapping, so you could play with underlaps and overlaps, and that's what I decided to do with this S as well, to kind of make it a little bit of a pattern to see that this S is looping around, and we already have one here, but this is going to make it a lot better if we can loop it around to match with this S. So I added another underlap to this to complete that pattern. Now it's already looking a lot better, and after sketching with this, I decided that I wanted to go with a tree branch to represent the city of trees, and how the fact that this university is one of the largest population of trees on campus with over 3,000 trees. So I was thinking of a way to do it, and I realized that this was a tree branch, or it could be used as a tree branch. And so I wanted to have this be like these twigs or these leaves sticking out from the tree branch. So I added these leaves, and that made it a little bit more fun, because it's not just letters, but it looks like it's growing a tree branch. So at this point, it already looks a lot better from the initial sketch I had, and it has a lot more interactions and a lot of playful aspects to it. And I wanted to add one more to kind of complete it. And the thing you can do with things like the baseline shifts is there's usually a gap right under these smaller letters that you can use to create a underline. And what I did was I just had a straight underline at first, and I realized that this didn't really do much of anything but recreate that sense of boring static nature. So what I decided to do was take this curve nature that was going throughout the whole thing, and I decided to do a little bit of that flow interaction around that E, and then come back around, do an underlap again, so break it off right there, and then come back around and then have it curve down. So it has a lot of the curves as well as the organic nature of the lettering. So that helped it as well. So at this point, it's really looking like a complete lettering piece. And once you're ready to ink it, you could then just put some tracing paper on top of it if you want to preserve the original sketch. And then you can just go back over and sketch the original sketch a little bit better, but in ink. And you could clean out a lot of those details that you were fixing up in the actual sketch. So once you have that sketched out, you could then go back and just ink it in to make it solid. And you could go over it and edit it with the tracing paper as much as you'd like. If you see anything you want to fix, it's probably best to just do it here with the tracing paper, because it's going to be a lot easier to fix with the tracing paper than on the computer. Alright, so this is a rough version of essentially what I ended up with, which was this sketch. And this is a product of several hours, so if it doesn't look right away, just be patient with it and keep refining it, because it is going to take a little bit of time to get it right, but it's going to be a lot easier to make those edits on paper with your pencil and your eraser than it is going to be on the computer, just because it's just not meant for that. It's meant for more of translating your design, and so just spending the right amount of time on paper is really going to help in the digitizing process. So in the next module, we're going to look into digitizing our GeoFilter, and in the next lesson, we're going to cover several of the programs you can use and where you can find them.